What's the best way to enact libertarian wins? Well, actually going out and doing the hard work. And that's what today's guest has been doing for the past few years. Let's dig into this and more.
Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to The Brian Nichols Show.
Well, hey there, folks. Brian Nichols here on today's episode of The Brian Nichols Show. We're going to jump right into things. I am so excited for today's returning guest, and that is the one, the only, Spike Cohen from You Are the Power. Spike Cohen, welcome back to the show, buddy. How you doing?
Brian Nichols, you so-and-so. No, I love coming on your show, man. I'm always happy to be here. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, buddy. Obviously, we're recording today a couple days after the tragic events that happened out in Utah with Charlie Kirk. I just wanted to start out saying, again, all of this has been unfolding behind the scenes over the past few days. It's been sucky, man. Honestly, it's been very tough on me. I don't know what it was about watching Charlie Kirk literally be executed on live television, more or less. But it wasn't and I'm not saying this to downplay that at all, but it was honestly, Spike, it was the reaction from a lot of folks that I thought I knew, actually celebrating his murder. And man, that's been the hardest part for me. But I don't want to start today's show doom and gloom, but I mean, Spike, just what was your kind of feedback, man? Like you obviously are a noted political figure here in the greater libertarian world, and you were a former VP candidate for the LP back in 2020. So, I mean, you're kind of a public figure, right? So, like, what was your immediate feedback on this?
I've gone to colleges to do speaking tours and debates, not the same format that he does, but I'm going to colleges to do speaking tours and debates. And so it definitely hits home for me. And even if I didn't do that, just the humanity of the fact that a man who was representing he was kind of, I guess, mainstream conservatism, not that if his opinions were more extreme, that would justify murdering him. And he sought to have debates and discussions with people. Again, right. Not that it would justify murdering him if he didn't want to do those things, but the fact that someone who often I mean, he knew how to monetize haters and all that stuff. Like, I mean, he could be combative in his debating, or none of that justifies any of this. When you have someone who is willing to engage in a dialogue with you of any kind, to give you a chance to say what you have to say, and then he says what he has to say, whatever that dialogue is, you don't kill that person. And I just, it's just completely unjustified. I think there are two groups of people that are either celebrating or just, doing the thing where they're going, well, I'm not celebrating, but I'm not upset about it either. And I think there's two groups of people that you can largely group them into one or the other. Maybe there's some overlap. One is people who like cosplaying as demons every time something tragic happens. And that's not even just necessarily, on the left or on the right. Or this just seems to be a certain number of people across the board who, when something terrible happens, they like to gleefully delight in it and show us all how demonic they'd like to act. So there's that group. But I think there's also a group of people who they look at Charlie Kirk and see an abstraction. They don't see a human being. They don't see a husband and a father. They don't even see someone whose opinions they disagree with. They see Charlie Kirk and they see every bad policy that they hate. They see every person that's been hurt that they actually do care about and see as a person that's been hurt by policies that they disagree with. They see that and they look at Charlie Kirk and he's now dead. And they basically think, all right, well, that side now has less power. Now, putting aside the fact that this has mobilized a lot of people, and I'm seeing way more. If the motive here was in fact to silence him, I think on the net, it only empowered his message. He's going to live a lot longer than he could have ever lived as a result of that. Yeah. But I think a lot of people, this goes back to the problem with politics. And this is just the most acute, visceral, angry version of that. Politics is conflict. It invites us to collectivize ourselves and to collectivize others. In order for us to engage effectively in electoral politics, we have to treat our neighbors like our worst enemies, either our greatest allies or our worst enemies, and there's no in between. We have to treat everyone who disagrees with us as an existential threat to us and everything we care about and everyone we care about. And the natural conclusion of that is, yeah, you start to reach a point where you either want them dead or don't care if they die. And that's the unfortunate reality of using the political process for everything. And a big part of what we do at You Are the Power is to try to rehumanize the people that are involved in these things and take the politics part out of it. Take the political parties and the campaigns and the ideological language and all of that out of that, and say, these people are being hurt. They need our help. We need to reach out to these people who are doing the harm. And instead of attacking them or threatening them, just asking them to stop.
Spike, you have had a huge transition over the past few years. Not in that regards. I don't want to paint the wrong picture here. No, your faith. You have really embraced Christ over the past few years. And I'm wondering, has that played into kind of your overarching ethos and how you're approaching, going out and talking to people about these very controversial and sometimes, very heated issues, much like what Charlie was doing? But is there anything you found in your kind of pursuit of Christianity and your embracing of Christ? Has there been anything that's helped you as you've been going through that?
It's weird. In one way, it's changed everything about everything that I do. I mean, my motives are entirely different. My number one North Star guiding principle used to be maximal liberty. And I still pursue liberty, and I still try to seek liberty for people. But my number one North Star is now to love the Lord my God with all my heart, mind, and strength, and to love my neighbor as myself. When I wake up first thing in the morning, the thing that I seek to do above everything else isn't to maximize liberty or to grow my the brand of You Are the Power or anything like that. It's to glorify God in everything that I do. So in one way, everything's changed. But what's amazing is, as I apply that in actually doing the work, not just sitting and thinking about how great God is, but actually trying to help spread His kingdom, I realize how much God was already putting everything in place before I was ready to acknowledge that I believed. Because more and more, the things that I do from the outset don't look significantly different than they did before I gave my life to Jesus. And I realize, many things have changed, but like, for example, our method for reaching out to public officials in a respectful manner and trying to seek reconciliation, which, by the way, has had a 100% success rate for the last 2 years and a nearly 100% success rate for the 3.5 years we've been around. Wow. It works. It's not just we're like, hey, please stop, and then they don't. Like, it works. But that change from being more, confrontational and like angry and visceral at them, to being more seeking of reconciliation, that process had already started. And at the time I was thinking, well, it seems like this works better. And then it turns out that's what God wanted me to do, to love my enemies and to pray for those who persecute us. And I think, all right, well, I guess you already said. And there's so many examples of that where it's like, I was already starting to do those things, I thought, for whatever secular temporal reasons I was doing them for. And then come to find out, it's like, no, God was already pushing you towards that. So it's pretty amazing.
Well, and let's talk about that, Spike, because this is where I think a lot of Americans are, especially young Americans, by the way. We've seen a resurgence in specifically Gen Z going towards the Bible, going towards Christ. And this kind of all weaves together with what we just saw happen on Wednesday with on September 10th with Charlie Kirk's assassination, the message and the pursuit of trying to create a more, I would say, a more cordial society to engage in the political discourse, not through violence, but rather through words, through debate. And then, talking about your finding success, not just in having conversations with folks that would absolutely be on the other side of the political aisle, but doing so in a Christ-like manner, right? And I just want to maybe better understand, do you think that there was something in the water, right? Something in the air, something out there that has been pulling our country more and more towards these Christian ethics, finally, right? I would say finally. But with this younger generation, you're out there talking to folks all the time, especially these young folk. What are you hearing, boots on the ground? Like, are you seeing the actual feedback from these young folk of, we're embracing Christ. We're trying to follow in the footsteps of Jesus. Like, what is it that you think has led us to where we are today?
Well, I'm definitely seeing a resurgence, and ultimately, and this gets into like soteriology and like, you know, our hermeneutics about the Bible, but I would say ultimately it's a moving of the Holy Spirit. I mean, what we are seeing is, you know, it is by God's will and by God's grace that we have faith in the first place. We actually cannot seek God on our own. It's something that God gives us as a gift of grace. The way that's manifesting itself is that people are waking up and realizing that the more equitable and fair and just world that we would get once we got rid of these silly fairy tales, that didn't pan out. Secular materialism has failed us. Like the idea that, you know, we live in an uncaring, unloving, purposeless world and universe, and we're all just a bunch of you know, meat bags who are so-called good and evil, and you know what's just and unjust is really just evolutionary preferences that have evolved over time, and that somehow that belief system would lead us to have this better and more elevated society has failed on every front.
If you're a new parent, you already know the feeling. Running on maybe 3 hours of sleep, chasing your kid before the coffee kicks in, it's like you're constantly in survival mode. And even if you do find time to eat clean or sneak in a workout, your body's just not operating at full speed. Stress, sleepless nights, and poor nutrition tank your nitric oxide levels, leaving you sluggish, foggy, and unfortunately snapping at the people you love the most. And trust me, I've been there. That's why I started using Cardio Miracle. That's a clean nitric oxide blend that supports energy, circulation, and mood with no caffeine crashes or stimulants. Just ingredients like organic beetroot, CoQ10, and L-arginine that naturally help you stay present, productive, and powered through parenthood. Trust me, this stuff helps you show up for your family. So, scan the little QR code over my shoulder, click the link in the show notes, or simply head to cardiomiracle.com/TBNS to give it a try. And by the way, when you go to cardiomiracle.com/TBNS, you're going to get a discount automatically applied at checkout. Just look for the little note saying you're shopping with Brian Nichols at the Cardio Miracle homepage. One more time, that's cardiomiracle.com/TBNS. And now, let's get back to the show.
And when you take a step back, of course it would. It's based on a far greater leap of faith than anything that's claimed in that anything you'd have to take a leap of faith in that's claimed in the Bible. I just want to take a step back here, and I love my agnostic friends and I love my atheistic friends, and I love to have these discussions with them. I'm telling you what my claim is, and you can take it wherever you want to go to. We are told that the secular materialism that atheism is largely based on. Not agnosticism, which is basically saying, hey, listen, I don't know. That's actually for many, that was where I was. I was like, listen, I'm humble enough to admit I don't know. I think there's almost certainly got to be a creator to all this, but I don't really understand the ins and outs of it. But atheism posits, we kind of do know. And what they posit largely is that we are in this uncaring, unfeeling universe that has no real purpose. And that, we are in it just kind of, there's not really any reason behind any of this. And so, I mean, the logical conclusion of that is nihilism. Do whatever you want. Like, what does it matter whether what you've done is good or evil? You can think it is, but that's really just a personal preference. And ultimately, we're all going to die and it doesn't matter. Well, then why would anything matter? But let's take a step back, because not only is that a horrifically hopeless worldview, but it's easily debunked by our own existence. We live in an uncaring universe. Well, I'm sorry, we're part of that universe. And we care. And we seek purpose, and we have purpose, and we find purpose, and we do feel, and we do have a sense of right and wrong and justice. So our own existence rebuts the entire thought that the universe doesn't care. Unless they are keeping the Christian belief, Christian metaphysic belief, that we are kind of set apart within the universe and are different from the universe. Okay, well, if they believe that, why? Why are we different and set apart in the universe? That points to an actual purpose of us being here. So it defeats itself. Like the underlying precepts behind material secularism that Western society increasingly has leaned on and away from its Christian precepts it fails on its face. The first examination of it, it fails. And so I see that I think what a lot of people are seeing, kind of going back to actually answering your question, I think that what people are seeing is that didn't work, and that it's leading to people questioning like examining every single thing and replacing it with insanity. And so and it's not leading to us being more together. We're far further apart than we've ever been. And it's not leading to more equity. There's far more inequity than there's ever been. It's not leading to more justice. There's more injustice than ever before. You know, we were told that this is it's progressive, like it would be progress towards good. And it turns out it's more progressive like a disease, that it just keeps progressively getting worse. And so I think a lot of people are just realizing like, okay, that didn't work. And so more and more people are turning back to God. Now, some of them are turning back to it and going, yeah, I'll take a look at this and see where it goes. And I think other ones are truly feeling like a tugging at their soul to turn back to God. That was definitely the case with me for the last couple of years. I just kept feeling more of a pull back to him. And I would look at people of faith, and instead of, I'll see people that, when they hear my faith and they'll go, oh, you believe in Sky Daddy and like all. And it's like, I never felt that for people of faith. I always envied them. I always said, man, I wish I had that. Man, how much easier would life be if I knew that in the end that God wins and his people win, and everything's going to be okay. And we get to live in paradise for all eternity, and doers of evil will suffer eternal death for it. Like, wow, that would be great. I wish I believed that. And I just felt more and more of a pull towards that until eventually I gave my life to Jesus last November. And I think that's what's happening with a lot of people. They're feeling that pull back towards that. And it certainly doesn't hurt that push that way to see that, yeah, secularism has failed us. It has failed us on every front.
Spike Cohen from You Are the Power here in the Brian Nichols Show. Spike, I have another follow-up to your faith. And I'm wondering, your path to becoming a Christian, has that, I'm assuming, has changed your personal values and personal beliefs more towards a Christian ethos. But how is that manifested in your approach to changing policy? I know you mentioned beforehand that your old ethos, your old Northern Star, used to be maximum liberty, and you find that you're still more or less finding that being the end conclusion. However, a lot of your goals obviously are now pointing back towards your North Star being Christ, being God. Yeah. So how is that how is that manifested in your personal values, and then when you're pursuing public policy changes?
Yeah, so I guess the best way to answer that is to just dive into what we're doing, and then how I personally am using that as part of my witness for Christ. I want to be clear, first of all, You Are the Power in and of itself is not a religious organization. We have people that are very devout Christians. We have people that are, very devout non-Christians of different faiths or no faith at all. And so in and of itself, it's not a religious organization. As a Christian, as a follower of Jesus and of the way, I find myself, everything that I do, including my work in You Are the Power, is part of my witness to Christ and my mission to glorify God. So what we do at You Are the Power is we find people who are having their lives upended by out of control government officials and bad government policy. There are many examples of this. People that are having their homes taken from them through eminent domain and through abuse of zoning restrictions and zoning bylaws by public officials who want to take their property for their own personal gain or for the gain of someone that helped get them into office. Examples of people that are being arrested for speaking about corruption at city council meetings. People that are just being arrested and being abused and then the police refuse to release the body cam footage to show that they were completely in the wrong. People who are helping people get back on their feet with charity, who are then being threatened with arrest for doing that because the local government is trying to score a deal with an NGO to spend a bunch of taxpayer money on the homelessness crisis, and you can't justify spending all that money if someone's out there doing it for zero taxpayer dollar cost. Another big thing we've been working on is innocent parents having their children taken from them, and everyone involved knows that the children have a chronic health condition that's causing them to have fractures and bruising, and that there's no evidence of abuse, but everyone involved intentionally pretends that they are being abused and ignores all of the medical evidence that says otherwise, because that's how they get their federal funding for their CPS services and the family courts and everything else. We kind of stumbled into that one, and we've been making incredible headway with that. But all of these things, the common thread with them, and we can get into specific examples of these to kind of explain how these happen. But the underlying thing behind all of those is that these people are having this, family or individual or homeowner or neighborhood of homeowners are having their lives upended because these people over here, who are in their various positions in government, city council, child protective services, family court, zoning board, wherever they are looking at these people as something other than people. They're treating them like a funding opportunity or a political obstacle or some abstraction. Kind of going back to what we were talking about with Charlie Kirk. They're not looking at a husband and father. They're looking at an abstraction. These officials are looking at these people, and they're not seeing a child who desperately needs their medical care and needs the loving care of their parents. They see an opportunity to get funding if they take this chronically ill child, refuse to acknowledge that they're sick, and go and place them in adoption and destroy this family and separate them forever, because that's how they get their funding. No one does that unless they've completely dehumanized the people they're doing it to. No one tries to take someone's house for their own personal benefit unless they've dehumanized that person and see them as just some obstacle that's in the way instead of an actual human being. And so at the core of everything we do is what we call the principle of human respect, which is that we have to demand that we are treated like people, especially when it comes to the government, because the government has all this, ability to do far more harm than any individual or any small group of people. They can do it at far greater scale. We have to demand that we are respected as people, because when we are respected as people, we are happier, we are more prosperous, more harmonious. Our lives are better. And when we're not treated like people, our lives are worse. And sometimes our lives can be ruined. And so that's our underlying message and our underlying tactic, because when we reach out to these officials, we don't reach out to the government. We also treat them like people, and we reach them individually and say, listen, back off and do the right thing here. And, we have sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of people reach out to them. These are people that are used to never having anyone reach out to them. Family court judges rarely have thousands of people reach out to them about a case. And they pretty much every time they back off. Sometimes immediately, sometimes it takes a little while for them to realize this isn't going away. Now suddenly they're famous on social media for all the wrong reasons. Sometimes they resign and the person that replaces them does the right thing. Sometimes they have a legitimate change of heart and don't just do the right thing, but they join us in making sure this doesn't happen again.
So Spike, I know you've been promoting the ideas for a long time of creating a better culture, right? And I'm glad you circled back and brought Charlie Kirk up again, because when you look at what Charlie Kirk was having effectiveness around, it was building this younger culture of more right-wing, Christian-rooted, more common sense conservatism, right? And yet he was still, obviously he was hated by a very, I'm not going to say a significant portion, but there was lots of folks who were very mobilized, right? Who would go out and do horrible things, but then other folks who are celebrating it. And I think the elephant in the room is that they didn't hate Charlie Kirk because he promoted a certain tax policy, right? They didn't hate Charlie Kirk because he was talking about school choice issues, right? What they hated Charlie Kirk for was more of these cultural issues. And it goes back towards a lot of the very incendiary topics that we've seen really, lead headlines for the past 5 to 10 years, right? It's going to be the LGBTQAI plus agenda. It's going to be the pro-choice versus pro-life agenda. It's going to be all of these much more culturally focused things. Racial issues, right? Talking about what we saw happen in the Charlotte stabbing there with the young Ukrainian girl, and having the race dynamics going back to George Floyd in 2020, and Ferguson, Missouri before that with Michael Brown. So we've seen that the real divisiveness isn't around the facts, figures types of policy, but more so on the vibes, the culture, the feelings side of policy, which impacts the culture. And I'm wondering, as you've gone through your pursuit of finding Christ and bringing more of the ethos of Christianity into your own life and how you're manifesting it and what you're doing at You're the Power, I'm wondering, have you found that those cultural issues are those things that you struggle with in trying to go out and actually, talk to folks? Because it does require you to plant a flag on a certain topic that's very unpopular for a very large group of folks in America. And what we saw happen this past week, that will motivate other folks to take very negative, drastic action to fight against that. So just kind of help us better understand your personal internal conflict, if any, looking at what you are, believing as a Christian versus talking about these issues from a policy prescriptive standpoint to a populace that is not 100% on board with these issues.
Yeah, so I've not thus far seen a lot of pushback on my specific social takes. And it's more so just that small minority of people who, as I like to put it, they don't believe in God and they don't care that anyone does believe. And boy howdy, they're going to let everyone know that every chance they can possibly get, just how much they don't care. So I'll get a lot of that where they're like, I can't believe that you believe in these fairy tales and the sky daddy. And did you know that the Bible's been translated and revised for 50 million times? And it's like, none of that's true. But and that there's like 65,000 different versions. It's like, none of that's true either. But they'll say these things that aren't true. Or meat bag that doesn't matter at all that I am. How could a loving God possibly do things I don't personally approve of? I get that kind of stuff, right? But I will say I've only recently begun to really take a stake on my position as a Christian on a lot of social and moral issues.
Yeah, tell us more about that.
Yeah. So I've only recently even really started talking about that because I've been spending a lot of time. I very much came into this with a lot of humility that I don't know these things. I know what I've been told. I know what I've heard. I know what I've read before, but I'm reading the Bible for myself. And I'm only about a fifth of the way through. I'm doing this Bible in 1 year study program, and I'm absorbing a lot of biblical commentary and a lot of apologetics and stuff. So I'm learning very quickly. But I've been doing this for less. I gave my life to Jesus November 20th of last year. So I'm less than a year into this, and so I really I've taken a very humble approach of making too many truth claims from the Bible other than the Gospels. I'm very clear and confident in being able to say man is fallen and sinful. We are unable to make it to heaven by our own merits because we are born into sin in our very sinful nature. And that the good news is God already knew that eternally before we were created, before he created the universe. And so he sent his only begotten son to die for us. And when we believe in him, we repent of our sins and we turn our lives to him. He forgives. He is good and just to forgive. And if we give our lives to him, then we have eternal life with him. People will ask me do you have any position on eschatology yet? And I'm like, yes, I believe that Jesus will return to judge the living and the dead. And so I'm still the finer points of these things I'm still learning. And the moral questions on things, I'm only just now getting to a point where I really feel confident taking a stake. Because what I didn't want to do was start, like when you're a new non-smoker and you just start attacking everyone because they're eating too many carbs or whatever, you've gone so far. And then over time you're like, actually, maybe everyone shouldn't be eating keto. I don't know. So I didn't want to be that. I didn't want to be, they call it cage stage, where when you first become a Christian, they got to kind of put you in a cage so that you don't offend everyone and so or just unnecessarily alienate everyone. And so I didn't want to be one of those people going out and saying you're not supposed to. So I wanted to have a more mature and nuanced take on these things, so that when I talk about it, it's not something that 6 months from now I'm going to cringe and go, I should probably delete that. And so I've only recently started really talking about those types of things, issues of abortion and homosexuality and these types of issues, because I really wanted to make sure that I was speaking from a place of knowledge, and also that I was speaking from a place of humility. Because whenever we're talking about same-sex attraction, whenever we're talking about any kind of issue of pride, right? Not just that kind of pride, but any kind of issue of pride. Frankly, we're talking about sin. And when you're talking about sin, it's very easy for us to start looking at the specks in other people's eyes, right? Because, it's easy. We can go, wow, that's sinful. I try to always approach it from the standpoint of saying, as someone who sins, let me tell you what my sins look like and how I have to deal with them. And that's true of these sins as well. If that's not yours, if the sins I'm dealing with aren't your particular issues, but you're dealing with this, you do have to try to mortify those things. You are separating yourself from God in doing that. It can actually affect your ability to even turn to him in faith, because that's in between you and him. So I'm increasingly talking about these things, but I also find that I tend to talk about it from the standpoint of instead of saying what you're doing is wrong, saying, hey, let me tell you what I'm doing is wrong. Here's what I have to do about it. And the reality is that there are other sins too, including these ones. And we have, anyone who's dealing with those has to deal with them in the same way that I'm having to learn to deal with them as well. Now, I know that that's still going to offend people. I know that that's still going to have people say, oh, Spike's a bigot or Spike's whatever. But ultimately, I'm saying we're all in this sin boat together. And if I'm going to tell you what your particular sin is, I'm a bit of a hypocrite if I'm not starting by going, let me tell you something. I'm a sinner. I have to pray for mercy every single day. Thankfully, his mercies are new every morning. But but these things are wrong, and whatever these different things are that we're talking about, they are wrong, and they shouldn't be done. Here are some things I do that are wrong and that I shouldn't be doing.
So, Spike, as we go towards the tail end of the conversation here, I would be remiss if I didn't focus more on you are the power, because you guys have not just been going out and building a great network of change makers, right? But you're actually finding success. And yeah. I think you hinted at that earlier. I want us to really just focus here in the last bit. Just tell us about some of those wins, because I know for folks in the world of politics, it can just always feel like a dog chasing your tail, right? You're focusing on a certain political issue, and then, oh, there's another issue. Let's go focus on that. But it never feels like you're actually making progress. You're making progress. You're finding wins. You're making people's lives better by doing all this great stuff at You Are the Power. So talk to us about some of these wins. And of course, for folks listening, how can they get involved? How can they join You Are the Power and help make those wins reality in their own localities?
Well, I'll start with that one first. You can go to youarethepower.net and become a member today. We'd love to have you be a part of it. You can be at the tip of the spear of all the work that we're doing. We have done such incredible stuff. We've kept people in their homes when they were going to lose them. We've helped get charges dropped against people that were wrongfully arrested. We've helped keep charities from being threatened with arrest for the crime of helping people get back on their feet at a time when that's desperately needed. And we've gotten corrupt officials to resign in disgrace across the country, coast to coast. I'm going to focus on one story because it's one of the most horrific things we've had to deal with. And it also kind of tells the story of how one family led to this movement that has helped so many others. So in October of 23, so You Were the Power at this point has been around for about a year and a half, give or take. And we've mostly at this point only done local stuff, because my big thing, and you know this, Brian, I am very heavily focused on, let's focus on winning. Let's build a culture of winning. That's important for us. We're good at valiantly losing and being prepared to valiantly lose and to almost kind of seek it, because it's weird to win. And did we compromise? Does that win because we weren't pure? And so what I was trying to do is say, okay, let's take things that, yeah, sure, they're small, although they're everything to the people we're helping. But it's global for the person that we're helping keep in their house. Forget local. And so let's focus on those things because we can actually win. So everything we've done until that point was like city councils, county councils, a sheriff of a county, whatever. In October of 2023, we heard about a family. We actually heard from a foster parent who she was fostering two children, a baby and a toddler. And they were told that the baby and the toddler were abused. And so they were fostering them. And she's looking, and the toddler is constantly saying she wants to see her parents and that she misses her parents. And where are her parents? When can she see her parents? And the baby seems like something might be medically wrong with her. And so she does a little research on the internet and finds the kid's parents. And the parents are saying, we didn't abuse our kids. They have a chronic health condition. Please help us get our kids back. We didn't do anything wrong. We're fighting. They did all these terrible things. And so she contacted DFACS, a Division of Family and Children's Services. That's the state of Georgia's Child Protective Service Agency. And so she contacted DFACS and said, I don't think these kids were abused. Can you look into this and just make sure you're, maybe not making a mistake here? I think this family might not have done anything. And their response was, your 13 years of service are no longer needed. Now, Georgia has a shortage of foster families to the point where some foster children are having to stay in the offices of defects workers. And in some cases, they're being put in hotels by themselves. And they just told a good foster family who's been doing this for over a decade, yeah, we don't need you anymore. So thankfully, Jennifer and Jonathan Williams, the foster family, reached out to us and said, please look into this. We think something's wrong here. So we looked into it and we found out it was way worse than they thought. Matt and Taki Hernandez are the loving parents of Emma and Aria, those two children. And Emma, the baby, she suddenly started having swelling in her legs and she was increasingly fussy. So they took her to Children's Hospital of Atlanta. They did x-rays on Emma and did a bunch of blood work. Now, eventually the blood work came back showing that Emma had, they pointed to her having some kind of a chronic health condition that explained her fractures and her issues. And there was no sign of trauma. That actual physical cause of this of this. So obviously it points to, but what it points to the fractures that were found in the x-rays being caused by this chronic health condition and not abuse. So instead they just accused them of abuse and took their children from them and arrested them both for felony abuse. And then as a condition of their bond, they weren't, the parents, the husband and wife, Matt and Taki, were not allowed to speak to each other or live together, or even be near each other, or communicate to one another through a proxy. So overnight, imagine taking your children to the hospital because one of them is something's wrong with one of them. And instead of them getting the treatment they need, you lose your children and can't speak with your wife indefinitely.
Wow.
Oh, and you're told you can't access your kids' medical records. So then they went and they spent tens of thousands of dollars fighting to get their kids' medical records. They finally get the kids, they've fought in court for months. They finally get their kids' medical records and they look and they see it's all explained by, the low vitamin D and all these different things. It points to a chronic health problems. They have medical experts look at it, pediatric specialists look at it and they go, yeah, there's no sign of abuse here. This is because of either osteogenesis imperfecta or neonatal rickets or something like that. But it's definitely a chronic health problem. And they said, oh, thank God, we'll just go to the family court. This was all a big misunderstanding. They'll see the evidence and we can get our kids back. The family court judge refused to admit any of the evidence into testimony, any of it. She wouldn't allow the medical experts to testify, and instead, she only took the testimony of the child abuse pediatrician at the hospital, who didn't bring any paperwork, did not seem familiar with the case, and his evidence was he went, when you look at these types of cases, statistically, they tend to be caused by abuse. And when the attorney asked him to cite the source of that statistic, he said, you can look it up on the internet. The judge took that stellar testimony as the only real evidence and ordered non-reunification, which meant that they would begin the process of placing Emma and Aria permanently in a adoptive family, like permanently for adoption, and Matt and Taki would never see their kids again. They had the looming specter of a possible criminal prosecution, in which case they both could face up to 40 years in prison. And they already had tens of thousands of dollars in medical debt. That's when we found, this was the point where we were finding out about it. Now we spent hundreds of hours, over 100 hours vetting this, because when I first heard about this, we didn't know everything we know now. And I said, I do not want to eat. First of all, we've never done a state level issue. And second of all, I do not want to inadvertently help an abuser of a child. So let's make sure that this is legit. And so we spent over 100 hours vetting it. And that's when we found all this out. We got the emails. We found out all about terrible stuff and defects. We had people leaking stuff to us. We were finding out just horrific things about what was going on there and in many other cases as well. So we put this story out. We created videos about it. We put it out there. And this is what we do. When we put out our content, we don't just say, hey, get mad about this thing. We tell them, here, you can help us with this cause by going to this page on our website for this cause, and here are the officials we need you to contact. And all you got to do is press their name or press their email address, and it will automatically pop up a pre-populated email with all the wording and everything already there in the body of it. You can change the wording if you want. You can add your own wording and do whatever you want, or you can just put your name at the bottom and press send in like 5 seconds. It's real easy, and you can help us in demanding that these children are returned to them. So that's what we did. We put it out there. We told people to go there and all of that. And so 3 things happened immediately. Thousands, I think tens of thousands of people immediately started angrily contacting the CPS worker, the CPS caseworker, the head of defects, Candace Brose, the family court judge, everyone that we gave the DA, everyone we gave them, and they got involved. And the second thing that happened was, for some inexplicable reason, everyone involved suddenly started capitulating. The family court judge, the CPS worker, everyone started backing off and saying, there's no evidence of abuse here. We're going to close the case out. Now, there was still this looming specter of the criminal case, okay? Mm-hmm. So the judge couldn't just allow the kids to go back home. They could go to live with family and get visitation with the parents. And once the criminal case was either dropped or they were found not guilty, then they could truly close it out and have the kids back. But at least they can see their kids. There's no threat of them being placed for adoption, at least not now. And they're not in foster care. They're with family, and their CPS case has been dropped. And the judge in the criminal case modified the bond conditions so that Matt and Tucky can live together as husband and wife again. So that's that's the second thing that happened. Third thing that happened was families came out from out of the woodwork in Georgia and across the country with the exact same story over and over and over again. Jeez. My kid had Ehlers-Danlos. My kid had osteogenesis imperfecta. My kid had complications from their birth, and a few weeks later they took them and accused me of abuse. Over and over again, the same thing. I was accused of abuse. They railroaded me. They wouldn't listen to the evidence. I had to fight to get the medical records. Everyone involved has to know that I didn't do anything wrong, but they keep, they just keep moving forward like I'm some kind of terrible abuser. I don't know what to do. I've lost everything. And then we found out why. Under Title 4E of the Social Security Act, the federal government has the funding structure in which they pay state CPS agencies based on the number of abuse cases they had in the previous year.
Good grief.
In other words, for anyone who might not have caught that, they are paying them every time they accuse someone of abuse.
Dude, this is a sales commission structure.
It's a sales. It's a perverse incentive. It is what government does. We'll pay you based on your quotas, and so it creates a quota system. So, and it's even worse than that, man. Because if they put them in foster care, they get even more money. If they place them permanently for adoption, they get even more money. And here's the real kicker: if it turns out they have a chronic health condition, they get the most money. So it behooves them from the whole, what we call the child abduction industrial complex, from the child abuse pediatrician at the hospital, who technically is not a government employee, but is a contractor of the government, the CPS agencies, the family courts, the foster care facilities, the visitation centers, all the vendors involved, every bit of it, it incentivizes them to look for chronically ill children that they can feasibly accuse the parents of abuse. And all they have to do, going back to what we were talking about dehumanizing, all they have to do is look at this chronically sick child and not think, wow, this kid needs treatment, but instead look at that child and go, cha-ching.
Yep.
And that's what's happening. So I know as horrifying as that is, this does end with some really good news. So we start doing the same thing with all these other families. We're putting their stories out. We're helping them get reunited. We're putting more and more stories out. We're helping them get reunited. Other organizations that have been fighting in this space for 20, 30 years, including some people who lost their own children, who have no contact with their children, who went to jail and went to prison for abuse that they didn't commit, are telling us we've only ever lost. We every once in a while will have one scant victory, but like we've only ever lost when we're fighting, but we just keep fighting because it's so wrong. You guys are winning left and right, and you're reuniting families left and right. So they join us in getting the message behind what we're doing. Investigative reporters start reaching out to us and start making documentaries about in Atlanta was a big market for that. Rebecca Lindstrom with 11 Alive, she put out a documentary, and then that led to Candace Brose reaching out to us, the head of DFACS. And she said, this is reaching out to us privately. This wasn't a political posturing thing. Publicly, she's not saying anything. Privately, she reaches out to us and says, I had no idea it was this bad.
Wow.
She's a political appointee. She's just going by what the people under her are telling her. She said, I didn't know. How do we fix this? So we gave her like a bulleted list of things that needed to be fixed. We said these need to be implemented immediately. When someone's accused of abuse, a parent's accused of abuse, they need to be able to have immediate access to their kids' medical records, and they need to be able to get a second opinion from a qualified doctor. That's outside of that system. That isn't being paid based on how many times someone's being accused of abuse. Oh, by the way, just as a side note, we're seeing a rise in the number of actual abuse cases because they're so focused on meeting their quotas that they're no longer looking for abusive parents who don't take their children to the hospital after they abuse them. They're looking for the easiest prey, who often is innocent. And so we're seeing, and that actually helps the CPS agencies because they can go to the public and say, listen, we're taking all these kids from these abusive parents, and yet we're still seeing more kids dying from abuse. It's an epidemic. We need even more money and even more funding. So it actually behooves them and it's very common with the government agencies. It actually behooves them for the problem to get worse. And all they have to do is completely set aside any scrap of humanity and be perfectly fine with destroying thousands of innocent families in order to maximize their funding structure. So anyway, going back to Candace Brose, she says, hey, what do we do? We tell her, here are the things to do. Let the parents get their kids' medical records. Let them be able to get a second opinion. Force the child abuse pediatricians to actually sign a document saying that they reviewed the kids' full medical records, and also so we know who actually abused them. Because what would happen is they would send out a letter and they'd say, yes, I've accused these parents of abuse. I've diagnosed these children with abuse. And it would have the name of however many dozens of child abuse pediatricians are in that entire hospital system. You don't even know who accused you, much less whether they actually reviewed their records. So we said those two changes and a few others that are in there. And we said these things need to be implemented immediately. She privately implements them immediately. Again, this was not for political expediency. She wasn't in front of cameras. She did this privately, behind the scenes. She put out memos to everyone involved, all the CPS agents, all the hospitals, everyone, all the mandatory reporters, everyone. This is how it is from now on. So we publicly went forward with it, and then we started saying this needs to be legislation. This needs to be codified into law. She helped us with that by saying, I support this 100%. It's what we're already doing. We had lawmakers, when we reached out to them before, tell us things like, I'd rather innocent parents lose their kids than guilty parents not lose their kids. That's before we had the public involved, that's the kind of feedback we were getting from our duly elected legislators or their duly elected legislators in Georgia. But then we got the public involved, and suddenly the law passed unanimously in both houses of the legislature. It was named Ridge's Law after Ridge Collins, a child with who was taken from his parents for over 3 years because he had complications from birth. And so basically they lost his entire babyhood. But Ridge is back home thanks to our help. He is back home, and Governor Kemp signed Ridge's Law into law back in May, surrounded by Ridge Collins and his family and many other families that we've helped reunite. And not only have we actually fixed much of the problem there in Georgia, but we're already having lawmakers reach out to us from other states saying, hey, this is a problem here. Let's fix it. I actually just came back a couple weeks ago from New Hampshire, where I spoke with a summit of lawmakers there. You think the problem's bad in Georgia? In New Hampshire, they're taking so many children that they're having to retrofit prisons and put foster children as young as 6 in prisons with juvenile offenders. I don't have to tell you what's happening there. This is a problem all over. But no, so here's the thing. Wow. I tell you this to tell you how bad it is, but the good news is we have lawmakers on our side to get this fixed. Not just in New Hampshire, not just in Georgia, but in multiple states, in West Virginia and Kentucky, states all over the country. We have lawmakers reaching out saying, how do we fix this? I believe that we are within a matter of a couple years of fixing this mostly at the state level and building the critical momentum necessary, the critical mass necessary to force Congress to, at the very least, I would say repeal Title 4E. Show me in the Constitution where it says that the government should be funding CPS agencies. But at the very least, if you're not going to get rid of it entirely, tie it to something neutral, like the census designated population of the state or something. Don't incentivize an accusation of abuse Don't tie it to any specific outcome. Just make it something as neutral as possible. So all of that, I believe, not only have we reunited many families across the country, not only have we actually turned the hearts of some of the people who were some of our worst opponents and turned them into some of our greatest allies. Not only are we getting legislation passed to fix this, not only are we working towards greater goals to make this go away entirely, we're making it so that eventually not only are all these families going to be able to get their kids back, but countless future families in the future won't ever have to go through this. All of that started because we found out about one family. And instead of saying, we need to let people know about the policy that's doing this and how the government is doing all this stuff, and basically telling them about something that sounds like a complete Leviathan that no one has any hope to stop, instead, we gave someone an attainable goal. We said, let's help this one family. Let's actually help convince this one judge, this one CPS worker, this one supervisor to give these kids back to this one family. And then let's do it again. And then let's do it again and do it again and again and again. And we built up from there. And that is what we do at You Are the Power.
I love it. I love that we ended the show on this story, Spike, because it gives people hope, right? And in a world where, my goodness, there doesn't seem to be much hope. You guys are showing not just that hope is possible, but there is a blueprint to find success, to your point, to get some wins. Spike Cohen, You Are the Power. I've loved having you back on the show, buddy. Do us a favor. youarethepower.net is the website, but where can folks go ahead and follow you if they want to continue the conversation? Social media links. Floor is yours.
Oh, I'm at Real Spike Cohen on X, but I'm easy to find. If you look for Spike Cohen on the internet, I'm a very loud person. I used to say I'm a very loud Jew. I'm not a Jew anymore. I can't say that. But I'm a very loud. Right now, I'm going to a Lutheran church, so I'm a very loud Lutheran. That doesn't sound as punchy as very loud Jew. So I guess I gotta let that go. I'm loud. You'll find me on the internet. If you look for Spike Cohen, you'll find me. But if you're on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it, I'm at Real Spike Cohen. And I'm Spike Cohen everywhere else. You'll find me pretty quickly. More importantly, go to youarethepower.net. If you want to be a part of what we're doing, you want to become a member, you want to be among the first to know when these things are happening, even before we release it to the public, youarethepower.net/join. If you need help, if you're dealing with something like this, you are having your life upended, or you know someone, or you've heard of someone who's having their life upended by corrupt government officials and bad government policy, go to youarethepower.net/help. Fill out our form. Our team will be in touch with you. If there's anything we can do to help, we will. And if you're in a position to be able to give, our causes on average, our non-family reunification causes on average cost about $5,000 per cause, which, if you think about it, getting charges dropped, getting public officials to resign in disgrace, getting changes made at the city council level, getting them to back off of bad bills. $5,000 is not a lot of money, but $5,000 is $5,000. For the family reunification causes, it's as much as $25,000. And again, when you look at everything we're having to do, the criminal cases, everything that's involved, multiple court cases and everything else, getting forensic experts to look over the medical records to make sure that we're not, wrongfully, inadvertently helping abusers and all that stuff costs money. So if you're in a position to give whatever you're comfortable giving, go to youarethepower.net/donate. And I'm sorry, man, but I just remembered that I left off the biggest part to the Hernandez story. So I told you there was, do you mind if I finish with that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I told you there were those looming criminal charges. Once we turned out that these DAs in these counties in Georgia, they can make a lot of money from this stuff. And they were not happy that after many years of just getting these parents to plea down and pay fines, and they made money that way, we kept winning in court. They would take these trials, they would take these cases, the Timms family and other families, they'd take them to court, to criminal court, and we destroy them because all the evidence shows that our client, well, I shouldn't say our client, that these families are innocent. We partner with attorneys who represent them. So we were 3 for 3. And in one of the trials, in the Timms trial, the jury and the judge were laughing at the prosecution.
Jeez.
I mean, we were monkey stomping these people in court because they have nothing. You know, it's no longer an arbitrary family court judge. There's a jury. There's innocent until proven guilty. There's discovery of evidence. There's a burden of proof and all of that stuff. And all of the evidence shows these parents didn't do anything wrong. What were you thinking even indicting these people in the first place? And so they got laughed out of court. These jurors would come in smiling and laughing, go, yeah, not guilty, and everyone would cheer. And it was just we were destroying them. So then when the Hernandez trial came, we're like, yeah, don't worry about it. They're just doing one last, whatever they can do. And at the end of the day, where they're going to monkey stomp them again. Okay. And respectfully. But what we didn't know was that the judge was going to collude with the DA and not allow the jury to hear any exonerating evidence. They were not allowed to see any of the medical evidence, hear from any of the medical experts that said that Emma had a chronic health condition. They weren't allowed to hear from. Have you ever heard a prosecutor say that they don't want the arresting officer to testify? You ever heard of that? Well, nope. In this case, it was because the arresting officer didn't think they did anything wrong. The jury wasn't allowed, so they weren't allowed to hear that. They weren't allowed to hear from the CPS workers who said there was no evidence of abuse. They weren't allowed to hear that defects, the CPS agency and the family courts had closed their case out because there was no evidence of abuse. That they were just waiting for this whole thing to go away so they could give the kids back permanently. They weren't even allowed to hear that Emma and Aria loved their parents. All they were allowed to see was the x-rays showing fractures and the opinion of that child abuse pediatrician that this statistically looks like abuse. Okay, the fix was in. Okay, but here's what the jury also saw. They saw that every single person in that room was only there to support Matt and Taki because we had volunteers going there. Their church was going there. There was about 100 people a day 50 to 100 people a day that would show up, and they'd all wear the same colors as Matt and Tucky were wearing that day. And they had to do that because the judge wouldn't allow them to have anything with any names on it. And at one point, he threatened the attendees with contempt of court if they made any facial expressions. Which, by the way, it's not possible to not make you are always making a facial expression. And so, but they saw it. The jury saw that everyone in there was, they were all on the same side here. Like why is everyone there in support of this family? And I suspect, I don't know this, I suspect some of the jurors might have actually said, you know what, we're not being told the whole thing. And if they looked up Matt and Tucky Hernandez on the internet, they'd very quickly, it would take them 5 minutes to watching one of our 6-minute videos would tell them everything they needed to know. I don't know if they did that. I don't know. But even if they didn't do that, it was pretty obvious the fix was in. So they voted not guilty on all 4 counts. That was on a Friday in May, I think May 29th. 2 days later on Sunday, I was in church with Matt and Tucky Hernandez and their children, Emma and Aria. They were waiting later that week, later the following week, they would finally be able to go to the family courts and file the paperwork so they could get the children back in their home and have this entire thing behind them. But they already now knew they were never going to prison. And, this thing was about to be completely over. And so they're worshiping together in church. And so I said, I have to go to this church. They were so incredible to us. They were feeding us, they were feeding my volunteers and everyone that showed up at picnics every single day during the trial, during the days of the trial. They were doing prayer intercessions at the church. They were staying up to be available in case Matt and Tucky, called scared in the middle of the night or something like that. They're facing decades in prison and never seeing their children again. It's pretty scary. And they were just there. And so I said, I have to see these people. I have to worship with them. These are my people. And so I went there and I will admit I got choked up when I'm watching, it's at the beginning of the service and we're singing praise and worship songs. And I'm seeing Matt holding, I forget if it was Emma or Aria and Tucky with the other child. And they're sitting there, clapping their hands and singing. And I thought, if it wasn't for us getting over ourselves and saying, let's try to help people that we can help right now, instead of waiting for some distant utopian future where libertarians have taken the world and left everyone alone. If it wasn't for us doing that, they would probably be in prison right now. Because they were told if you're found guilty, you're not getting out. They had already filed to say, hey, can they stay out while they're on appeal if they're found out? And the judge said, absolutely not. They're going directly to prison. And they probably would have, or they would have pled down to something else and spent a couple of years in prison and never seen their kid. Their family would have been torn apart.
Wow.
But we stepped in and got involved. And fast forward about a week later, their children are back home. And Matt told me, I messaged them and said, hey, I just wanted to say, God bless. I'm so happy that they're home. And he said, we're sitting on the couch watching a movie together as a family for the first time in like 2 years. And then just a couple weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, they were in Myrtle Beach to see family. And I got to eat with them, have lunch with them. And it really drives home. This is not an abstract thing. When I say we have 100% success rate, that's a cool metric, but every single one of those successes represents a family that was facing losing their home, their freedom, their children, their family, everything. They were facing losing so much, and in some cases, everything. And the only thing that was, and they had already done everything they could, and they were about ready to give up and find out what mercy they could get from the horrific people that were doing this to them. And then we stepped in and got involved, and it all went away. That's what we do.
Good stuff. Spike Cohen, love you, buddy. Thank you for joining the show. Folks, if you got some value from today's episode, do me a favor. Go ahead and give it a share when you do. Please tag Spike Cohen over on social media. Go ahead, give some love to You Are the Power, because, yes, you are, in fact, the power. But with that being said, Brian Nichols signing off here on The Brian Nichols Show for the one and only Spike Cohen. We'll see you next time.
God bless, guys.
Thanks for listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.